excited to introduce our next speaker. Heidi Waterhouse has spoken at a number of DevOps days around the country, and even though she lives here, hasn't spoken at this one yet through, you know, these coincidences. But what I'm really excited about having Heidi give us some insights into that whole bus factor thing is, I don't know about you, but I like to sometimes go on vacation, perhaps to the boundary waters, places that might be a little bit difficult to be paged or, you know, log into anything. And if we want to create the kind of spaces that allow that, it's kind of nice to have the sort of culture and the sort of, I'm not even going to say documentation, just the sort of processes that make that possible. So let's, I'm gonna call Heidi up to give us some solid insights into how we can make the sort of organizations that allow us to, say, go to a conference for 2 days and not spend all of our time working. All right? Give it up for Heidi Waterhouse.
That'll be exciting. So this talk is about fear of the bus. And we all know this joke about the bus factor, like, is your company going to fold if your founder or a key member gets hit by a bus? And there are startups who insure key members with life insurance sufficient to close the company down because there is no way to continue without them. The less gruesome version of the bus factor is if someone wins a lottery. The weirder version is if someone gets kidnapped by aliens. But it all comes down to the same thing. A company needs to not be dependent on a single person. Because it turns out that even if nothing happens to them in the long term, there are events that can cause us to not be able to get into work. How many of you were here for this? You remember what happened to traffic, not just that day, but for months afterwards? That whole thing with 280, let's not even think about that. There can be IT outages, EC1 can go down. Events occur that make it impossible to reach someone, and we need to build in a redundancy factor for that. I work with a lot of DevOps people, and I work with a lot of developers, and I know all of you are running just to stay in the same place, like Alice in Wonderland. The Red Queen of product management has grabbed your hand and says, we have to run really, really fast to stay in the same place. That doesn't give you a lot of time for all the other things that you need to do. But it turns out that humans store important things in volatile memory. And as soon as you get distracted from your task, all the things that you were mentally retaining fall on the ground, you answer their question, and then you look at all of the tasks on the ground and think, or maybe coffee. And that's just how humans operate. The thing that we need to be able to do is have pointers that are not stored in people's volatile memory. Like, even if you write something down and you put it in a wiki, can anybody find it? Or is that stored in RAM? Is that stored in the fragile remembering place? Bridges rely on redundancy. You don't know this, but this is the same bridge that's in that image that we're using. This is the Sabo Bridge, which is a pedestrian bike bridge here in Minneapolis. And it's a cable stay bridge. And the way the cables work is they are wires, wound around wires, wound around wires. I used to have a GIF of a wire wrapping machine in here, but I took it out because it was way too hypnotic. And people would just stare at it and be kind of offended when I took it off. But the thing about cables is if one thread of them breaks, you're not in trouble. Like, your bridge is a tiny bit less stable, but the bridge stays up. It's not like if one part of it breaks, everything dissolves. And so that's a really important redundancy theory. You want multiple threads holding you up. So, like I said, I am a technical writer, and I have these core principles for DevOps documentation, which are not the same as user documentation. That's an entirely different animal. Core principles for DevOps documentation. Everybody can touch the docs. everybody can touch the docs. I do not want it to go through my $2,000 seat license software. I need it to be in Markdown, in text, in HTML, something that you need no tool to access. Content matters more than presentation. I'll get into that again in a bit. And documentation reduces burnout. I'm friends with Eric Holscher, who runs Read the Docs. Who among you uses Read the Docs? Yeah? Who among you pays for Read the Docs? It turns out that he's very, very close to burnout because he's doing all the support for a product that doesn't get paid for. And if he had time to document how it worked, he would be less close to burnout. And I think it's super ironic that this documentation product that so many of us use is very fragile because of the lack of documentation. Here are some other principles. Wrong data is worse than missing data. Who among us has not run the wrong script? I have run the wrong script, and I don't even run scripts that much. It turns out that it's really easy to follow the directions in what seems like the accurate wiki page for how to set up your system and be wrong. And so I would rather you had to go ask somebody than do the wrong thing. Missing data is worse than ugly data. If it's there, at least you can do something with it. If it's not, you have to go ask somebody, and I personally don't like having to ask people questions about how to run my daily life, and I can't be the only one who feels like that. Ugly data saves lives. I used to think that this was an exaggeration. When I wrote it, I'm like, our stuff doesn't really save lives. But when you think about it, it does. We're running the systems that the systems run on, that do save lives. And if you understand that we are an interconnected web of connectivity, you realize that somewhere out there we are doing something that is more than software, that is people. So there are 3 categories of DevOps information that we need to think about. And only 2 of them do you need to actually document heavily. The first kind is automatable information. If you know how to build a server, you could either write it down or you could write a script with hopefully some directions. Because anytime you automate something, you make it less possible to screw up. And that's what we're going for. I would rather not screw up. So let's automate it. I have 2 children. They're 14 and 12 years old. And I had an exciting milestone this week. I taught my 14-year-old to mow the lawn. It was so great. He's scrawny, so he's like pushing the mower like this. I don't care. Good job, kid. I have now automated a child process for mowing the lawn. I still have to invoke it. Like, it doesn't run automatically. There's not really a good cron job for children's chores. If somebody invents one, let me know, because the whole thing where I have to kick things off is tedious. But I've created an automation so I don't have to do that work. And all of you know that automation is a good idea, but you don't really think about it as an information repository. If you've automated it and documented how to kick it off, you don't have to do anything else to it. Someone else can just do it. The second kind of information that we really need to work with in DevOps is structural. And structural data is of a couple kinds. This is a Jira page, like, we all know this. Jira is not fun to use. Like, let's just own that. Jira is terrible. But it does something really important. It offloads a bunch of cognitive load. What you're doing is filling out forms instead of writing out paragraphs that say, hey, I encountered a bug in version 6.2. I was trying to do this thing, and then this other thing happened, and it's user visible, and I have these modules installed. I don't want to write paragraphs like that because, for one thing, that sounds tedious, and for another thing, I will forget something important to diagnosing the bug. But if I can just fill in a form, I've offloaded a ton of cognitive load. So we need to be thinking about all the places that we can get people to provide data that is sufficient and not extraneous. The other thing we need to document is workflows. We really have to think about how something happens, because there's all these places where we know it because we've done it for years This is not an important workflow. This is just one I found. But we haven't really put it down how to communicate that to somebody. The last kind is secret. Secret data is the most frightening kind of data to write down and to document because we don't know what's going to happen to it, and we've been told it's secret and important to keep secret. So if you work for a big company, you have somebody who does your threat analysis for you, and they tell you how you should handle your PII and your PHI and all of this information. That's a solved problem for you. If you work for a small company, you don't always know that, so you have to do your own threat analysis. What could happen if the data is lost? What could happen if the data is found by good actors, like an internal person sees your payroll? And what can happen if the data is found by bad actors? If people who are intent on the destruction of your company find this data, what happens? And lots of times, if it's like code, it's not actually going to give them that much information because so much of the value of your product is not just how you execute something, but why. So if you think about what you could lose, think about if you hire somebody to do your website and then you fire them and it turns out they're the only people who have the password to get into your website. That's never happened to anyone. It's super expensive to convince someone that that's actually your website, but not as expensive as it is to convince Microsoft that your employee who signed up with their personal email is not your primary point of contact after they leave. Like you're like, oh yeah, we have a a developer subscription. They're like, no, that dude has it. I don't know about your company. Information has got to be findable, usable, and current. You must make sure that people can detect the information when they need it, use it if they need it, and that it isn't bad. Like, how many of you have run current script, and what you were actually supposed to run was new script 14? Right? I've done that. So if it's not current, it's really, once again, bad data. Here are things that I think are low priority for DevOps documentations. I don't care if it's pretty. I don't care if it's in PDF. I don't care if it's fancy, like zero graphics is fine by me. I don't even care if it's friendly. Like, you may not even have headings in this thing. And that's not ideal, but it's sufficient. So here's how you do it. You got to collect the information. First thing you do is you start with a documentation audit. This is finding all of the stuff that's in your wiki that you didn't know you had, and also prying it out of people. You need to figure out what people are using. You can set up Google Analytics on almost any internal site or external site and figure out what people are searching on and address that issue first. Because it turns out that your search terms are what people are confused about. It's really obvious when you think about it that way, like, people are looking for something. Can I provide that thing? But a lot of us aren't using analytics to figure that out. And you have to figure out the Post-it note people. I love the Post-it note people. There is somebody who has key runtime instructions written on a Post-it note attached to the side of their monitor or under their keyboard. You have to track down all the Post-it note people and get them to tell you what's going on. There are general information types that you're going to want to sort this collection of data into. There's a punch list that tells you if this, then that. So a punch list is like, if AWS goes down, first I need to check if it's down for everyone or just me. Did I pay my bill? And then you need to do this, and then this, and then this. A punch list is really important, especially in emergencies, because nobody thinks straight when their system is down. Their hair is already on fire, and they don't want to go to multiple documents to find anything. The next thing you need is the people responsible. Like, who can help you save this? Who is it you should call next? The next thing is workflow. What is, on a general good day, the way we should do things? For instance, a termination workflow needs to involve turning in someone's badge and making sure they get their COBRA paperwork, making sure they get their last check, making sure that their network access is logged out. You don't want to forget any of that, so you write it down in a workflow. Make sure you document your support information. It's really hard for someone to back you up if you're the only person who knows how to contact support for a product. I've had that problem where I'm like, oh, well, if you just call support, they have a thing that they do, they purge the logs, and then it all works fine. Well, I can't call support because it's on a Post-it note on your desk, and I'm a remote worker. And you need to document dependencies. What is it that you need to do to make this set of circumstances happen? So for instance, if you lose power, you need to reboot in this order, but first you have to understand how this Sun system reboots in a particularly weird way. So you may have a dependency pointing to that Sun reboot document, because it's not something you need often, but it needs to be part of the punch list. You need to be able to find your documentation. I already said that before, and I will say that so many times. I favor a wacky thing called a flat file. If you put all of your DevOps documentation in one big flat text file, you will be better off than you think. It is super ugly. It is against every principle of technical writing and design that I can think of, and it's totally searchable. There's one place that you go to search for information. It's not going to work for a big company, but if you're in the under 50 category, it might work for you. Because over 10 years, 15 years, Gmail has changed how we think. It's basically human indexing on an outsourced scale. If you want to find something, the first thing you do is search for it. You don't look in the table of contents. You look for the keyword that you associate with your problem. So if you have documentation that contains the words that you need, you're going to be able to find the answer. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it'll work. And I think you should also scroll things off the bottom, like add things to the top, scroll things off the bottom, because if you have a DevOps procedure that lasts more than a couple years, you probably need to revisit it anyway. So, you know, as you scroll things off, be like, is that still true? Is that still working? I'm just checking. So big long text document. You might have a hack day every month or so to put in like fancy headings or, you know, number the steps or something. That'd be nice, but it's not essential. Because like I said, we're all storing this information in our head. So what's this called? Blue screen of death. Until 5 years ago, you could not search the phrase blue screen of death on the Microsoft site. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't get you any answers. Because that's not what they call it. They call this a fatal exception or a couple other things, but they never call it a blue screen of death. And so we couldn't get that answer from Microsoft because we had this different terminology. And so you need to figure out what it is people are searching on, what people are looking for, how it is they think about your software, your DevOps procedure, and use those words. This is an emoji, and I love this idea so much, I stole it from 18F. 18F is a cool little startup that's part of the General Services Administration. They're putting out a bunch of really great guidelines on accessible web use. You should go look it up. When somebody says in a Slack, here's how you do that, you put a unique response emoji, a React G, next to it, and then a guy named Mike Bland wrote a Hubot plugin that will scrape out whatever that was and add it to GitHub. I'm like, that's genius. It's a bug that says we should document this, and it pulls it out of that stream of Slack and says, hey, here's a thing that's an instruction. Let's document this. Let's make a bug out of it automatically instead of people having to do it. His repository is in my slide notes, which I'll publish. So when you have a bunch of data, you have nothing but threat surface. The older data is, the less useful it is, and the more vulnerable it is. So we need to talk about how to throw things away. All data has an expiration date, and you should think about the fact that you are giving people expired milk, bad food when you are feeding them old data. If I keep saying this at enough conferences, someone will build it for me. I want a Confluence plugin that gradually ages Confluence data so that at the end of a year, it is entirely a white-on-white CSS. Like, you can highlight it to read it, I guess, but I want you to instantly know that this is old data and shouldn't be trusted. I think if we had some automatic ways to make the age of information visible, we'd be much better about updating it. When we collect tons and tons of data, we make it much harder to search through it and understand what it is we're looking for. This is 1 day's worth of Flickr photos that's been printed out and piled in a room as a museum exhibit. I just love this because it makes us think about how much data we're hoarding because we think we might want it someday, as opposed to having an intent for it. And I don't want us to think data is cheap, I can store everything, because you can store it, but you can't use it. It's like that stuff that you have in a storage locker. If your storage locker burned down, you'd be sad, but your life would not be changed. Nothing would change. So we're only holding on to data for the same emotional reasons that we're holding on to stuff. We're just scared. Testing is for everyone. How do you know if your Docs DevOps initiative worked? Well, Netflix has chaos monkeys, but I want to introduce the idea of using chaos monkeys for humans. Somebody's had a rough night, you take their pager away, and you swear. You swear you will not page them for 2 days. You will not call them, they will not come to work, they will actually be on vacation. It will be amazing. I think that when that happens, you really detect where it is that you have flaws, because in the inevitable nature of the universe, people will know, or software will know when to go down. And then you'll find your thing, because, I don't know, I'm a little, I wouldn't say theistic about this, I'm just superstitious. I'm superstitious that software knows when we expose our vulnerabilities. So take a person out of the rotation sometime when you're testing, but you're not under pressure. Sometime when it's not an emergency if you lose something. Never call someone in the hospital. I just need to put this slide in because I was talking to a friend who got a DevOps call while she was otherwise occupied. And they couldn't figure out how to get something up. She's like, busy now. There are times that you cannot reach someone and you need to be okay with that. And if you test it under load but not under pressure, you're going to be so much better off as an organization. You want to do DevOps documentation, not because it's the right thing to do. No company or organization has ever done something because it's the right thing to do. You want to do it because otherwise you have to post this picture on your uptime stats. And nobody wants to do that. It's terrible when you have to say, we failed because we didn't know how to bring it back up. So think about Docs as part of your disaster planning, and think about it as part of your redundancy, and think about it as part of the way that you respect the humanity and vacation time of the people you work with. If that was too long and you read Twitter instead, write it down because that's easier and safer than remembering it. And I would like to say that I am not a technical writer anymore. This is my big, exciting announcement. I've taken a developer advocate position for an organization called Launch Darkly, and we do feature flags as a service. If you're interested in that, I would love to talk to you about it. They're supposed to get me my business cards next week. And I think I did not violate my time span.